Thank you so much for watching this video. My name is Tina, I am Head of Design of Victoria Designs. This video is going to be kind of an introduction workshop, let's call it that, to show you how we work and to give you a better insight on how we like your designs to be. But let me first tell you something about Victoria Designs. About 8 years ago, I started another Etsy shop, and I started actually making paper beads and jewelry with those paper beads. And when I was looking on Etsy to get some more inspiration for my jewelry, I stumbled upon these shops, and these shops sold a lot. And they sold actually what we are selling now: digital crafting graphics. Now, the interesting thing was I already started to take some Photoshop lessons because I wanted to enhance the pictures that I made of my jewelry. Back then, there were no apps to make your photos look better. No, that wasn't just there. And when I saw these shops that also made these printable, crafty thingies, I thought, hey, I can do that as well. Why wouldn't I do this? So I started another Etsy shop with exactly this, my first digital crafting graphics. And I must say, yeah, they were a bit different, but it was a very good learning school. And then about, I don't know, a bit more than half a year later, I started to rebrand because I wanted another logo, another name, rebrand a little, make it a bit more posh, and that's when Victoria Designs was born. And I think after a month or two, things were really getting good. And I talked about my recent success to Jay, and he was very interested. And after a very nice lunch with the whole business plan, we decided to go into business together. And we've never looked back since. So, and as you see in our Etsy shop, we sell a variety of things that can be printed out by the customer themselves and be used for a lot of crafting projects. The products that sell very good right now are paper packs. So those are, let me show you a few. Those are basically collections of full-size papers. And with full size, we mean the American full sheet size. So it's called a letter page. It's 8.5 by 11 inch. Why that size? Yeah, because the Americans are our biggest group of customers, so that's why. Yeah, and some of you probably already made these, like this one. And it's just a collection of 8 images, 8 papers, 8 full-size papers around a theme. And they are a very cohesive collection, but also varied enough so it can be used for anything. That's just what we call a paper pack. So 8 different designs. Oops, sorry about that. So 8 different designs that fit together, full page. So 2550 by 3300 pixels. So that's 8.5 by 11 inch at 300 dpi. So that's a little bit of information about our paper pack. And then the other thing that really sells very well these days are junk journal kits. And here are a bunch of our junk journal kits. Now, what is a junk journal? Let me show you. So if you go to Pinterest and you type in junk journal, you will find an enormous amount of examples. So I gathered a few here. So let me show you. Yeah. So let me enlarge this a little bit for you. It's actually a handmade book or a journal, and it's often made with found and recycled materials. So papers from magazines, brochures, music sheets, envelopes, paper bags, doilies, etc. Paper doilies, of course, postcards, etc. And yeah, anything that can fit into a handmade book can, in theory, be added to it. And you can make it as shabby or as neat as you like yourself. A lot of people like the shabby look these days. And there are no rules and limitations. The problem is a crafter really likes to make something like this, and they don't always know where to start. So we provide the materials to go in there, or at least to start. But let me give you a few more examples of such journal kits, junk journal actually. So this is, I like this very much, this one. Look at that. No, this is a bit too large. Very nice one. See, the colors are very well chosen by this artist. This is the same book but closed. So this is the cover, and this is the book on the inside, one of the pages. So here's another example. Another one. Here's another one with a very, very, very nice cover. Like, this cover is actually a masterpiece on itself. This is a more traditional look. Yeah, here's a very nice travel journal. Yeah, and here's another example. So basically, crafters can really, really go nuts here and put their heart and soul and all their creativity into making these books. And like I said, there are no rules. So yeah, this is a very, very trendy craft right now. And we, like I said, we like to provide those pages for them on the inside. Let me give you a few examples. You see, okay, so here are two examples from our nautical journal. There are spots where people can write, like here. But I don't always provide that because sometimes customers love to add their own extra pages, etc., or their own journal spots. So an empty paper like this one is called a journal spot because there's a spot to journal. And I'm talking about journal pages the whole time. Now, what is essentially a journal page? So a journal page is a sheet like this one. So I'm gonna, let me put this away. So like this one. And it's in a horizontal layout, so it can be folded in half. And if you stack these journal pages on top of each other and fold them in half, it's called a signature. And when you glue or staple or sew a bunch of these if you glue, staple, or sew a bunch of these signatures into a cover, yeah, you have a book or a journal. Now, a good journal kit, like we define it, has 6 journal pages, and we like to make 4 varieties of each journal page and vary in the amount of embellishment. So let me show you what I'm talking about. So we have here 6 journal pages that I recently made. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're all different. And for each of these, I made a variation. Zoom in to show you. So this is the first one. And then I used the same materials from this page here, but I left out a few of the illustrations, like these two, the ink pot and quill, and this envelope. And I also got rid of this piece of text here. And then the rest I shuffled around. So it's different, but it's made with the same materials. And then I made a slightly different journal page with even less of the material. So here I got rid of these papers. And although I used the same background items, I used this in another color. I changed colors here and there, and I just shuffled them around a bit. And then I made another variety, with even less embellishments, but still very interesting. This one. See? So there's 4 completely different pages, but I only made one, and then I switch things up. The important thing is to make sure they don't look too much the same. Let me show you the next one. So the second one, I'm gonna make it a bit bigger. So first one is this. Oh, I totally forgot to tell you. This is called a vintage writing journal kit. But you probably already guessed that. So a lot of writing things and typewriters and pens, etc. So the first one, and then the second one, you see this piece, I flipped over to the other side of the page. And these pieces, I got rid of this typewriter, I got rid of this advertisement, and I flipped the pages around. See, they're horizontal now instead of vertical. This stamp got here. Oh yeah, and this one, I didn't get rid of it, but I just put it behind. See? So it's actually quite different, but I use the same materials. And then another variation with these is this. So this time I got rid of all these papers. I made this stamp and made it brown. So it looks completely different. And of course, pages like this don't really have journal spots, but now they can add their own. Oh, they can just write here. And the last variation, ta-da! It's different because I chose to use other colors, shuffle the items around a bit, and yeah. Next one. So, for example, I got rid of the pencil and the sketch here, the pattern sketch here, and this paper I just turned into two small ones. Yeah, another variation and another variation. Next one. Yeah, I'll just flip this one to this side. Another variation and another variation. If you want to analyze these better, you can just pause the video or ask for the pages from me. I am very happy to send it to you if you want. Okay, next one. Last variation. And then the last paper, I have this variation, this one, and this one. The key is to make them different enough and yet make sure they all fit together. So if I zoom out now, I have a collection of 24, which is a lot, journal pages, and I actually only made 6. So, like I said, a good journal kit has 6 different pages, and each in 4 varieties. And we also like 5 or 6 pages with embellishments. So all kinds of trinkets and pieces and elements that can be cut out and added to the journals, like these pockets, for example. You can make pockets and people can tuck letters and tags and etc. in there. And quite recently, we also decided to add a paperback to one of these journal kits. Show you. So this is a paperback that I added to this journal kit. See, this one is brilliant to make. Sorry for the resolution. I made these smaller to fit on the overview page. So this is brilliant as a cover. And then I used items from the journal pages to make these papers. So, and the rest of these papers are actually a paperback made by the guidelines that we give out to actually make a paperback. So there are patterns and there are images that customers can use for all variety of things. So this was an extensive explanation on what is a journal kit, how do crafters use it, and how do we provide some value by selling our kits. This way we make it a bit more easy for customers who really don't know where to start. And if you've seen our YouTube channel, we also provide tutorials how to use this, how to make it. So if you're interested, we have a whole YouTube channel and we explain completely how to make this. So yeah, how to create these journals. This was a brief introduction about Victoria Designs, and this was also a bit of an explanation on our paperbacks and journal kits. And now probably the most important part, how to start designing printable crafting graphics. It's very funny. When I started designing, I didn't have a business. It was just my hobby. And I started designing by, let's say, putting a little flower in the center of a sheet or a workspace. And yeah, from then on, it just went from there with trial and error. But that's not really the best strategy. So I have for you a few tips to really streamline your designing of these printable crafting graphics. First of all, preparation is key. For real, I've done years without preparation and I've lost vast amounts of time. So the important thing is, before you start designing, make sure you have a pretty good idea about the direction you're going in. And one of the most important things to make before you start designing is make a color/texture/graphic palette. I have one here on my screen. See one that I used for the vintage writing journal kit that I showed you before. I built up a palette with the colors that I wanted to use, some of the materials that I wanted to use, and some of the graphics that I wanted to use. Of course, not everything, that's not possible. But this way I had a clear idea of what vibe, what style everything was going to be. So as many of our vintage designs, I started out with a paper background and I used a piece of paper, and this is actually the paper that I'm using throughout the whole journal kit and the paperback. I changed some stuff here and there, or I got rid of this fold here and there, or I made it a bit lighter, a bit darker, but I ended up really using this paper the whole time. And then I added some text because it's about writing. Yeah, some papers, of course, a bit of texture, a pattern, an envelope, some graphics. And here are actually, yeah, this is actually the color palette that I've used. Not exactly all the time. Sometimes I went for a darker lavender when that was more appropriate, and sometimes a lighter. More graphics. I actually didn't use this one at all, but that's okay. Add another graphic. So this was an excellent starting point. Now, if you make this, awesome. Then your work is going to be that much faster. Keep in mind, this is not set in stone at all. If you make a palette like this and halfway your designs you're like, I want to throw in another color, or I want to change this color to this, or I don't want to use that graphics, I'd rather use these. Go for it, of course, but it's so important from the beginning that you have some kind of guideline. And if you stick to it, great. If you change it afterwards, great. But have something to hold on to. So that's the palette. Another great tip to prepare, and I've done this as well, is gather all or most of your assets up front and make a list where you can find them. And when I made that list afterwards, I didn't have to go look for hours to find that single image. So that list really saved me a lot of time. It might sound boring, but your time is so precious. Your free time as well. So yeah, it's so worth it. So, and another handy thing that you can do beforehand is create some layouts when you're making papers or when you're making journal kits or even when you're making tags, etc., to make sure you have an idea of what to put where. Now, again, this is not set in stone. I'm going to show you just a few ones. I just put a few boxes on a page. And later on, I'm going to show you some examples. So this is one. This is another one. So for example, the main image could be in the center and the edges could be all the embellishments. I am gesturing at my screen right now. You can't see it at all. Okay, I have to gesture with my mouse. Okay, here's another example. So for example, if this is a paper pack, this part could be a pattern and this part could be other more graphics design. And then here's another example for a paper. So let's say this is all pattern. This is another pattern or a design, this part as well. It doesn't have to be complicated, but have an idea. And here's another more strict layout. For example, if you're making a paper pack, this could be an image with a frame and a graphic inside. This could be a piece of a patterned piece. This could be some kind of a ribbon or like a washi tape with miniature images on them, etc., etc., etc. So this is another way that you can prepare before you start actually designing. So for the preparation, make a palette, gather your list of assets and make some layouts if that's applicable. And then let me show you how I usually start building my designs. This is one of the pages for the writing journal kit that I showed you. You can see it on the same kind of paper texture that I'm using here. And I always start by actually using a background, choosing a background. This is very vintage, so vintage paper, awesome. And then to break it up and to make them all a bit different, I like to add a texture on top. Now this is actually, let me show you, some kind of plate from wet plate from photography or something. I have no idea, but I have a few of these, so I reckon I can use a different one on each paper, and then even though I use the same paper as background, they're going to look different. This was put on soft light, yeah. So I have some texture on the background, and then I'd like to choose my most important graphics. So this was a graphic that I really wanted to use. Yes, another thing, I can go in depth of making those in another workshop perhaps. But up front, I also make 6 of these stamps, and I can use them throughout the design. So this was one of my main images that I wanted to use. Because this is a journal page, sometimes it's best to have a center line to fold them in half. I chose to do one now. It's not always necessary, and we're still figuring out whether the customer likes these center lines or not. I also wanted to use some papers, so where people could write on. So this is actually an envelope with a piece of tape and a paper with a piece of tape. And on that paper with a piece of tape, I had a sketch of a typewriter that I found. So here are the most important images in place. And then I start to build further. I'm going to tuck some designs behind here, etc. Let me show you. So here in the corner, I added actually this stamp, but in another color and just a corner. Just to add more depth, to add more interest. Then, yeah, I also thought I wanted to implement a bit of a botanical image. So I found these vintage images of flowers, and they will be everywhere throughout all the journal pages, but not on the foreground, but more subtle on the background. They will not ask for all the attention. No, they're like subtle on the background. So in the same plant I used on the other side as well, more gray color. Yeah, and I also liked to use these, let me show you, these swirls. And I'm going to use those throughout as well, as you see them appear on the screen. Oh yeah, and here in the corner again, this stamp, I think, but just a corner. So, and then I added a bit more interest, a piece of text and some typewriter things, and that's how I actually built it. So, a background, add texture, place your most important graphics, and then fill the rest with interesting things that don't really need to get all of the attention, but make it very, very clever and pretty. One of the most important things is to create depth, and mostly that results in a lot of layers. But be careful, a lot of layers is not the goal. The amount of depth, see here on the sides, etc., that should be the goal, of course. Now, I have been talking about making collections of papers or journal pages cohesive, so color-wise, style-wise, etc., but also varied enough that it's not all the time the same over and over again. A very good idea to do that is to actually reuse assets throughout the whole collection. So repeat some details here and there between the pages, between the different sheets. And it's really important to find that fine balance between variety and cohesiveness. And how can you do that? For example, you can use an image and reuse it, like this one, in another color. You can make a very obvious piece less obvious, like I did here. Or you can even make a less obvious item suddenly on the next page more obvious. And you can change the blending mode, or you can make it smaller or larger, or you can suddenly use a very important image as just an embellishment and stuff like that. But start to reuse assets. Sometimes I see paperbacks and every page is made with totally different assets. And I think, oh my God, they should have been looking for assets for hours because it's all different. And the downside is that sometimes results in a whole collection of sheets that don't belong together because they're all way too different. So it's a very, very good idea to reuse your assets throughout the collection in different ways. It ties the whole collection together. One of the best ways I use to save on time is to make a production line. Let me check this way from it. Yeah. So what did I do to make this collection? I made this whole first paper and I wrote down, I made a list. First I did it, then I did, I made a list on how I built this page, just like I explained before. So a background and a texture, then I wanted some papers and some attachments on the papers, and then attachment like these staples or these, tape, pieces of tape, or this is an attachment as well, paper clip and another clip, etc. These are attachments. And then I wanted some stains, and I wanted some swirls, and I wanted some of these stamps that I made, etc., etc. So I actually made a list, and once I completed this whole page, I made a production line. I made 5 separate files, and first step, I gave them all a background. Second step, like I did here, I gave them all a texture, a different one, but I did it at the same time, so I was really playing factory here. Then I wanted to give them all papers or journal spots or cards or whatever. So these journal spots, I added them. Then I wanted all to have an attachment, like these clips and paper clips and buttons and staples and pin, here's a pin, etc., etc., etc. Then I wanted to all to have some form of these swirls. So I tucked them away behind some of the designs. And then I gave them all extra steps, etc., etc., etc. So I built one as a prototype, let's just say that. And then I just built all the rest step by step at the same time. And then when I was ready, I started to make the variations. And this was actually pretty easy to do after these were ready. So a production line is brilliant if you want to save time. And now I think the best tip I can give you, I might have said that before, this is the best tip, this is the best tip, but this is actually really the best tip, is the power of making decisions. Of course, when you design, you have to make a lot of decisions. A lot of them are very important and deserve to get some time and attention, like making this palette. But as you know, as a designer, you're also going to have to make 1,000 minor decisions. You know that. And it is so easy to get sucked in that, to sit back and think, oh, am I going to put a bird here or perhaps a little flower? Well, I'm going to give you a secret. When you get caught into thinking like that, because I can easily think about that for half an hour, bird, a flower, flower, a bird. Take a step back and think, does the customer care if this is going to be a flower or a bird? If the answer is no, probably not, just make a decision. Pick the flower, pick the bird, whatever, but make a decision fast. And decision making can just give you so much more time that will otherwise be lost. So make your decisions, give them the time they deserve. Minor decisions, just decide. Okay,